Welcome to this deep dive
Oh, yeah.
into some fascinating documents.
Yeah.
Declassified FBI files from 1947.
Wow.
We're right at the peak of that flying saucer craze.
Uh-huh.
And instead of looking at official reports,
Right.
we've got internal memos and telegrams
Hmm.
sent between FBI offices and the director.
I see. Yeah.
So it's kind of like we're peeking behind the curtain a little bit at a
Yeah.
time of genuine uncertainty.
Right.
What can we learn from these reports?
Well,
Are there any patterns, any insights that emerge?
yeah.
What does this tell us about information flow
Yeah.
and public perception in 1947?
Well, if we start chronologically,
Okay.
the earliest reports are from late June
Right.
and early July 1947.
Right.
And one thing that immediately jumps out at you
Yeah.
is the sheer variety of descriptions.
You'd think it would just be flying saucers,
Right.
but
It's way more than that.
way more than that.
You've got everything from discs and balls of light
Yeah.
to objects with flames.
Really?
One report even describes something like a flying mayonnaise jar,
A flying mayonnaise jar.
which is, let's be honest,
Yeah.
a pretty hilarious image.
Okay, so maybe not all of these reports are super credible,
Right.
but it seems like people are really seeing all sorts of things in the sky.
Yeah.
I mean, what would you make of that if you were seeing these things back then?
I think it's important to remember the historical context.
Okay.
This is just after World War II.
Right.
People are on edge.
Yeah.
There are anxieties about new technologies
Mhm.
and potential threats.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising that people might interpret
Sure.
unusual sightings through this lens of flying saucers.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
There's a report from July 12th
Okay.
that I think speaks to this anxiety.
Okay.
A witness in Idaho gave an incredibly detailed description of a disc 30 inches in diameter,
Okay.
shaped like a saucer within a saucer,
Wow.
with a plastic dome, metal tubes, even wiring.
Wow.
He even noted what looked like an inspection stamp.
Wow.
He sounds credible,
Yeah.
but he's also clearly frustrated
Yeah.
that no one seems to be taking him seriously.
And his experience wasn't unique.
Really?
This feeling of being dismissed by the authorities is a recurring theme in these reports.
That's interesting.
You can sense this growing distrust between the public and the government,
Yeah.
especially as the media frenzy around flying saucers intensifies.
Speaking of media frenzy,
Yeah.
there are a lot of reports about reporters hounding FBI offices,
Yeah.
desperate to break the story.
Right.
How was the FBI handling all this attention?
They were definitely trying to manage the information flow.
I see.
In many cases, they were deflecting media inquiries, citing a lack of jurisdiction, advising local authorities to handle incidents.
Right.
They didn't want to be seen as fueling the hysteria,
Right.
but they also had to be seen as taking these reports seriously.
It sounds like a tough balancing act.
I was!
Did they ever attempt to explain what people were seeing?
There are actually several attempts at explanation within these documents that
Yeah.
give you a sense of how people were grappling with the unknown.
Okay.
There's a scientific perspective emerging
Right.
with articles discussing how the laws of eyesight
The laws of eyesight.
could explain the round shapes
Okay.
and size estimations.
So maybe it wasn't aliens.
Right.
But just our eyes playing tricks on us.
It's the idea that objects at the limit of our vision tend to appear round regardless of their actual shape. This makes sense when you think about how many reports describe discs
Right.
or saucers.
Yeah.
If you're straining to see something in the distance,
Yeah.
it might appear round even if it's actually something quite ordinary,
Sure.
like a plane or a bird.
Okay, so maybe some of these sightings could be explained by our own perception.
Right.
But what about all the reports of strange movements and formations? Surely those couldn't be explained away so easily.
Well, you also have to consider the psychological factor,
Okay.
which is where the mass suggestion theory comes in.
What's that?
This idea suggests that people see what they expect to see, especially when it's fueled by media hype.
So are you saying that the media was actually creating the flying saucer phenomenon?
Think of it this way.
Right.
The idea of flying saucers is already out there.
Yeah.
It's in the newspapers.
Right.
It's on the radio.
Yeah,
This creates a kind of mental framework for people.
I see.
So when they see something unusual in the sky,
Mm-hmm.
they're more likely to interpret it as a flying saucer,
Right.
even if it's something completely explainable.
That's a fascinating take.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how much our own beliefs and expectations
Right.
shape our perception of reality.
It's a really important question to consider,
Yeah.
especially when we're dealing with something as mysterious and elusive
Right.
as UFOs.
But there are also reports from people who are convinced that these objects were real and potentially dangerous.
Yeah.
One pilot even expressed his belief
Yeah.
that several plane crashes could be linked to these disks. He felt completely dismissed by the authorities,
Right.
which, given what we were just talking about with media hype, has got to feel frustrating. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He represents a segment of the population that was genuinely concerned about the potential threat posed by these objects. They weren't just caught up in the hype.
Got it.
They believed that something serious was happening and that the government wasn't taking it seriously enough.
So we have this spectrum of reactions.
Right.
From scientific skepticism to genuine fear and everything in between. But what about the government itself?
Right.
How did they actually respond to all of this?
Well, the documents suggest that the FBI's role was primarily focused on information gathering. They wanted to determine if there was any threat to national security.
But they also seemed pretty reluctant to get directly involved, right?
Yes.
Like they were passing the buck a bit.
In many cases, they cited a lack of jurisdiction and advised local authorities to handle the incidents.
Right.
But you're right. There were also some internal debates within the FBI about how to handle this phenomenon.
So what were they debating about?
There were memos expressing a desire for more investigation, a sense that something strange was happening.
Right.
Other memos emphasized avoiding censorship and respecting jurisdictional boundaries. It's a fascinating glimpse into the internal struggle within the FBI as they tried to balance taking these reports seriously without overstepping their authority or causing a panic.
It's almost like they were caught in a catch-22.
Yeah.
If they investigate too aggressively.
Right.
They risk fueling public hysteria.
Exactly.
But if they dismiss the reports entirely, they risk ignoring a potential threat.
Exactly.
And this tension is something that continues to play out even today.
It does.
When it comes to UFOs and other unexplained phenomena.
Right.
It's a question of how we, as a society, respond to the unknown. Do we approach it with curiosity?
Right.
Or with fear?
Yeah.
With skepticism? Or with open-mindedness?
That's a big question.
And those questions, I think, are at the heart of this whole deep dive.
They are.
These 1947 reports, even without definitive answers, give us a really unique perspective
They do.
on our relationship with the unknown.
I think that's a great place to pause for now.
Okay.
When you come back, we can delve into some more specific reports.
Sounds good to me.
And see what other insights we can uncover
Yeah.
about how the FBI, the media, and the public were grappling with the flying saucer mystery.
We'll be back in a flash.
Welcome back to our deep dive into these declassified FBI files from 1947.
Yeah.
Before the break, we were discussing how the FBI was trying to manage this influx of flying saucer reports while also trying to figure out what, if anything, was actually going on.
Yes, and it's interesting to see how their approach, or perhaps lack of a definitive approach, only added to the mystery and intrigue surrounding these sightings. If the FBI, with all its resources, wasn't able to provide concrete answers, it left this vacuum that was ripe for speculation and imagination.
And you can definitely see how that speculation took hold.
Right.
This period really marks the beginning of modern UFO lore, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The themes and questions that emerged from these 1947 reports, the nature of these unexplained phenomena, the possibility of extraterrestrial life, the government's role in investigating and disclosing information, these are all questions that continue to resonate today.
It's amazing how much these initial reports and attempts at explanation from 1947 are still relevant today.
I agree.
We're essentially still grappling with the same questions, just with more information and perhaps even more uncertainty.
And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We're not just looking at historical documents, we're exploring the origins of a mystery that continues to captivate and challenge us.
There's a report from July 12th that I think highlights this tension between the public's desire for answers and the government's more cautious approach.
I see.
It involves a pilot named Horace Winyan, who claimed to have seen two strange projectiles while flying over Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, back in 1946.
That's a year before the flying saucer craze really took off.
Right.
I'm intrigued. What did he see?
Well, according to the report, he described seeing two objects that he believed to be some kind of experimental rockets. He even went so far as to suggest that they might be linked to the series of plane crashes that were happening at the time.
Wow.
He felt strongly enough about it that he contacted both the Civil Aeronautics Authority and the FBI.
So he was raising some pretty serious concerns. What was the FBI's response?
They interviewed him. But ultimately decided not to pursue the matter further, citing a lack of evidence. And the fact that Wenyon's description of the objects, which, by the way, a newspaper had dubbed flying mayonnaise jars, was based on a fleeting glimpse.
It almost sounds like they were dismissing his concerns because his story seemed a bit outlandish.
It's possible.
Especially given the nickname the media had given the objects.
But it also highlights how the FBI was trying to filter information, trying to separate what they considered credible threats from what they might have seen as public hysteria or just plain misidentification.
This raises an important question for you, though. What constitutes credible evidence in a case like this? What happens when a seemingly credible witness reports something unusual, but there's no physical proof to back it up? Who gets to decide what's worth investigating and what's not?
Those are really difficult questions.
They are.
And it's fascinating to see them play out even back in 1947. It's a debate that still surrounds UFOs.
Absolutely.
And other unexplained phenomena today.
These 1947 reports provide a unique historical lens through which we can examine those questions. They remind us that even in the face of the seemingly impossible, we need to approach these topics with both curiosity and critical thinking.
And speaking of critical thinking, there's another report from July 6th that tries to debunk the flying saucer mystery. Using, of all things,
what's that?
The laws of eyesight.
Yes, this goes back to the idea that objects at a distance can appear round and distorted, regardless of their actual shape. It was a popular explanation at the time, attempting to ground these fantastical sightings in something more scientific and understandable.
The author even recounts his own experience of seeing a distant oval object that he initially thought was a flying saucer.
Oh, wow.
But as it got closer, it turned out to be, you guessed it.
What? An airplane.
It's a good reminder to not jump to conclusions,
It absolutely is.
This report emphasizes the importance of seeking out multiple perspectives and explanations before attributing something to the extraordinary. And this applies not just to UFOs, but to any situation where we're confronted with something we don't understand.
But even this article, which is trying to be rational and scientific,
acknowledges the power of the force of suggestion. The author suggests that people were primed to see flying saucers because of the media frenzy. And were therefore more likely to interpret any unusual sighting in that way.
That's a good point. The media undeniably plays a role in shaping public perception. Sometimes even amplifying anxieties or fueling speculation. Think about how quickly rumors can spread today through social media.
It's crazy.
It's even easier now to create a sense of mass hysteria or excitement.
Which brings us back to the media's role in all of this. There's a telegram from July 11th that perfectly captures this media frenzy. It's from the FBI office in Cincinnati and describes how various news outlets, including the National Broadcasting Company and the Associated Press, were scrambling to break the story of a recovered flying disc in Roswell, New Mexico.
Roswell. That name is practically synonymous with UFO lore. It's amazing to see how these early reports, even before the most famous Roswell incident, show how fixated the media already was on this idea of crashed discs and government cover-ups.
And what's interesting is that the FBI in Cincinnati is asking the FBI office in Roswell to keep them updated on the situation. Not necessarily because they believe it's something extraordinary, but because of the intense public interest.
I see.
They know this is a story.
Yeah.
That's going to capture people's imaginations.
They're trying to stay ahead of the narrative to anticipate how the media might frame the story.
Yeah.
And to manage the flow of information before it gets out of control.
But sometimes those attempts at control only fuel the flames of speculation.
Right.
Especially when those explanations seem inadequate or dismissive.
Exactly.
Take the report from September 9th, for example.
Okay.
It's a letter from a pilot who's deeply concerned about the flying disc phenomenon.
Okay.
And its potential link to aircraft accidents.
I see.
He feels like his concerns are being brushed aside by the authorities.
This gets back to the distrust we were talking about earlier.
Right.
He argues that many pilots have seen these objects, but are hesitant to report them for fear of being ridiculed.
That makes sense.
He even suggests that the government might be downplaying the issue.
Right.
To avoid public panic.
It's almost as if he's accusing them of a cover-up.
Right.
Even though he doesn't explicitly use that term.
It's more a sense of frustration with the lack of transparency and urgency on the part of the authorities. This highlights that inherent tension between the government's need to maintain order and the public's right to know, especially when dealing with something as potentially unsettling as unexplained aerial phenomena.
It's fascinating how much this tension still resonates today, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's a theme that runs through many of these reports. It shows how the flying saucer craze wasn't just about strange lights in the sky.
Right.
It was also about the public's evolving relationship with the government, with authority, and with the idea of truth itself.
Let's delve into another specific case.
Okay.
There's this intriguing report from September 3rd that details a series of sightings over Twin Falls, Idaho.
Okay.
A couple named Mr. and Mrs. Blank witnessed multiple groups of objects flying over their house in a triangular formation.
A triangular formation.
Yeah.
That's a detail that comes up quite often in UFO reports even today.
Right.
It suggests a level of organization and purpose that sparks the imagination. It makes you wonder if these objects are being controlled by some kind of intelligence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in this case, the objects were described as being in groups of 3, 5, and 7, which adds this level of specificity. That's both intriguing and a bit unsettling.
Right.
Almost like a coordinated fleet.
Were the Blanks the only witnesses?
Right.
Did they give any details about the appearance?
Unfortunately, the report doesn't offer much detail about what the objects look like. It focuses more on the number of objects and their formation.
I see.
But what's really interesting is that the Blanks weren't alone.
Really?
In their observations.
Oh, wow.
They called the police, and the police officers also observed a group of about 12 objects.
Wow.
Flying over the city.
Multiple witnesses, including law enforcement.
Right.
That definitely lends a bit more weight to the report.
Right.
Would anything come of the reports to the authorities?
The report states that the FBI office in Butte, Montana, which was handling the case, decided to close the investigation without any further action.
That's frustrating, isn't it?
It is frustrating.
We get this glimpse of something that sounds potentially significant, and then the trail just goes cold.
Right.
It's like we're constantly hitting these dead ends.
And I think it highlights a feeling that a lot of people who are interested in UFOs can relate to.
Right.
There's this constant search for answers, for evidence, for something concrete that can help us understand these mysteries.
Right.
But we often end up with more questions than answers.
And maybe that's part of the allure.
Right.
The unknown has a way of captivating our imaginations, drawing us in with its mysteries.
Right.
These 1947 reports offer a window into a time when that sense of wonder and uncertainty was particularly heightened. A time when the world was looking to the skies and asking what else is out there.
I think that's a perfect place to take another short break.
That's good.
When we come back, we'll continue our exploration of these fascinating FBI files. And the government's attempts to explain these sightings.
Right.
But it wasn't just the public that was struggling to make sense of it.
Well, not at all.
Not at all. These documents actually reveal that even within the FBI, there was a range of opinions on how to handle this influx of reports.
Interesting.
Some agents seemed to be genuinely concerned about the possibility of a real threat, while others were more skeptical.
Right.
Maybe even dismissive.
There's a memo from July 14th, where an FBI agent in San Francisco expresses his frustration with the lack of information coming from the military.
Wow.
He even goes so far as to suggest that the military might be withholding information, which of course only fuels public speculation and distrust, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And that idea of a potential cover-up,
right,
whether real or imagined, really taps into a broader sense of unease that was prevalent in the post-war era.
That makes sense. Think about it. People had just lived through a world war. Right. They were facing the dawn of the atomic age. The Cold War was starting to heat up.
Yeah.
It was a time of tremendous uncertainty and anxiety.
So these flying saucer reports, in a way, became a symbol of those anxieties, a way for people to project their fears about the unknown.
They became a kind of Rorschach test.
I see.
For the anxieties of the time.
Interesting.
Some people saw them as evidence of advanced Soviet technology. Others saw them as a sign of an impending alien invasion.
Right.
Still others saw them as a challenge to our understanding of the natural world.
There's a memo from July 23rd that really illustrates that point. It's from the FBI office in Seattle. And it describes how they received a letter from a citizen who was convinced that the flying discs were Soviet weapons.
Wow.
Can you imagine what must have been going through this person's mind?
Yeah.
The world had just narrowly avoided another global conflict.
Right.
And now these mysterious objects were appearing in the skies.
It's a stark reminder of how interconnected our fears and our perception of reality can be.
It really is.
And it's interesting to see how seriously the FBI agent who wrote the memo took this concern. He actually suggested that the military should investigate the matter further.
So even though the FBI was often trying to downplay the flying saucer phenomenon, they couldn't completely ignore the possibility that it might represent a real threat, especially in the context of the Cold War.
That's right. And it really highlights the complexity of their role in all of this. They were trying to walk this fine line between investigating potential threats and not overstepping their authority, all while trying to manage public perception and prevent mass panic. It was an incredibly delicate balancing act.
And looking at these documents, it seems like they ultimately decided to err on the side of caution. They gathered information. But they avoided making any definitive statements or drawing any conclusions.
Which, in a sense, only added to the mystery. The lack of a clear explanation from the government created this vacuum that was quickly filled with speculation, conspiracy theories, and a growing sense of unease.
It's fascinating how much of what we still discuss today about UFOs has its roots in those early responses or lack of responses from the authorities.
It's like these documents offer us a window into a pivotal moment in our cultural relationship with the unknown.
That's interesting.
They show us how a single unexplained event or a series of events can spark a wave of speculation, rumor, and fear.
It's true.
And how those stories, once they take root in the public imagination, can be incredibly difficult to dislodge.
And that perhaps is the most important takeaway from this deep dive.
I think so.
These 1947 reports, even though they don't offer any definitive answers about the nature of flying saucers, force us to confront our own limitations, our own anxieties, and our own desire to understand the world around us.
It's a reminder that the search for truth is an ongoing process.
It is.
And one that requires us to be constantly questioning, reevaluating, and revising our understanding of the world around us.
It really is.
And perhaps just maybe someday we'll finally uncover the truth behind those enigmatic flying saucers that so captivated the world in 1947.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive. I hope you found this exploration of the FBI's 1947 flying saucer files as fascinating as we have.
I did.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most compelling stories are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers.
That's true.
And it's a testament to the enduring power of the unknown to capture our imaginations and spark our curiosity.
Indeed. It's a reminder that the world is full of mysteries. And that the journey to unravel them is often just as rewarding as the destination.
This is Host Speaker signing off for the deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
And keep looking up.